Hello and welcome to On the Prowl. I'm your host, Gabby Raby, and with me today is the coach of the Hahnville Tigers, Coach Nick Saltaformaggio. Thanks for joining us this week, Coach.
Thanks for having me, Gabby.
Coming up on today's show, Coach Salt will break down last week's Jamboree game against the Jesuit Blue Jays, and we'll get Coach to look ahead at the opening game of the season versus the Woodlawn Panthers. How was preseason practice this year?
It was pretty good, Gabby. You know, we actually started way back in January, and we have what we call our Toughest Tiger program that runs from January all the way to August. Starts with Tiger Speed and then kind of ends up with us maxing our kids at the end of July. We give them the last week of July off, but attendance was really good. You know, you fight a lot of things in the summer, vacation, guys who are multiple sport athletes being away for their other sports, but everybody came in and made their allotted number of lifts and allotted number of practices. So I think it's why, you know, I think we're going to have a really good football team.
Okay. Coach, you had a 78-yard punt return in the first half. Was this a key factor to start the momentum for your team in the first half?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you always, especially the way we approach the Jamboree, I'm not a big fan of Jamborees because, you know, well, number one, they don't count. You know, so if you win the game, it doesn't count. If you lose the game, you feel terrible, but it still doesn't count. And then, God forbid, you get somebody hurt in the game, that doesn't count. So whenever you can have a big play in a Jamboree like that, it kind of gets everybody excited. And, you know, it was a big momentum boost for us.
Were you encouraged by the defensive touchdown?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get a score like that, Elgin Collins is a very good football player, number one. And anytime you can flip a field, we had fumbled a punt, Jesuit had a short field, and we were able to, you know, turn that negative into a positive with a long fumble return for a touchdown.
What must you improve in your run game for it to be effective?
That's a great question. There's probably three parts to the answer. Number one, we have to really work at it in practice. We have to want to become a good run team. The second part is we have to get in ball games where we're blocking the right people on those run plays. We can't keep having run-throughs like we did against Jesuit. And then thirdly is the hardest part of it, and that is just continuing to create a culture of toughness. We're not an overly tough offensive football team, especially up front offensively. So we have to find a way to kind of create that culture. And I think the only way to do it is you have to practice harder. You have to make your practices tougher. And you have to almost pull it out of those guys. So that if we can get the third part down, we'll take care of the other two.
Does it trouble you that your team had 3 turnovers in the Jamboree game?
Oh, yeah, it's terrible. I mean, you know, and it's not something, you know, we work on not doing that. You know, the interception by Austin early on, that was kind of a forced hand because, again, we didn't protect him very well. We had a run through on a pass protection, and he had to get out of the pocket and throw in a bit, you know, a lot of coverage on a scramble. Then, you know, we fumble a punt. You never want to have that kind of miscue with a fumbled punt. And then, you know, we turn the ball over down in our own territory on an inside run late in the half with a 14-7 lead. So all those things, all those turnovers give football teams extra possessions. It gives them an extra possession, in this case, on a very short field. Jesuit didn't have any long drives. And then in a game that's, or a Jamboree that's only a half of a game anyway, you lose out on opportunities to have the ball in your hands to score. So it's something, you know, that's a correctable error. It's really just has to do with focus. We have to focus on ball security when it's in our hands.
Let's take a look at the first half highlights.
It's always nice to play in Tiger Stadium. Kids love it. For a Jamboree, we had a great crowd. Thomas Roscoe, who's been our kicker now for 2 years, does a nice job. And this is something that's a little scary, is you don't do live kick coverage until you play a game. At that speed, we were able to do a nice job in our kick cover game as far as kickoffs were concerned. Trayvon Anna with a tackle for a loss. After a turnover, Jesuit goes in and scores and gets an early lead. And then Anthony Williams, you know, who's just a phenomenally electric player for us, gets a nice kickoff return. And had we blocked the kicker on that, probably would have returned it for a score. But again, you know, getting that long 78-yard kickoff return, and it leads to a nice pass from Austin Perrin to Anthony on a third down play. where we were able to tie the score. And I think we're going to come right back, and we're going to turn the ball over. Jesuit gets it back on a fumbled punt. Down deep in our territory, we get a sack on first down. And then on second down, we get an unforced error, miscue, and then Elgin Collins, who's a heck of an athlete for us, plays outside linebacker, picks it up and runs it into the end zone and gives us the lead going into halftime. And the second half's going to come out. We really couldn't muster any run game at all, and so we kind of became a one-dimensional football team having to throw it. Thankfully, we have a very good quarterback in Austin Perrin. And, our receivers did a nice job catching the football. But again, when you have to throw the ball as much as we have to throw it, usually bad things are going to happen. Sure enough, we turned it over and gave Jesuit another short field, which they capitalized on, went in and scored. But I felt like we played really good defense most of the night. There's an example by Rashad Domino breaking up a third down pass. And it seemed like Jesuit had the football on our side of the field the entire second half until this last drive here, where we were able to mount a drive down the field. Unfortunately, late in the game, we had a penalty on us on an offensive pass interference call that put us in a long distance down. But the fact that we were able to come through, and our team's always been pretty resilient. Even the 2 years I've been there now, we've always kind of found a way to come back, and they did that night. We just ran out of time, but that's going to happen in the Jamboree. It's not a long, it's a half of football, and like we said earlier, those 3 turnovers just destroyed us.
You only had 15 yards offensively in the second half. What happened to the momentum you had in the first half?
The big thing is we couldn't run the ball. I mean, that's what hurt us. And then, we had some sacks. When you get those tackle for losses, it takes away from your offensive run totals and your offensive total yardage totals. And, again, it goes back to kind of the very first question you asked about running the football. Jesuit, obviously is a very, very good football team. But what they did was they out-toughed us. And when you get out-toughed, it limits what you can do offensively. And, we just didn't get a lot of possessions. The turnovers obviously take the ball out of your hands. So it was more of problems of what we didn't do correctly than what Jesuit was doing to us.
Sports Nola says Jesuit seemed to dominate up front. What will you do to improve your offensive and defensive line play?
Well, I thought defensively we were pretty stout. We just kind of wore down a little bit, and I think we'll be fine there. Offensively, again, it's kind of the theme of the show. It's we have to be able to create some toughness, especially with our guys up front. I mean, we have some big linemen, but there's a couple that they have to know who to block. But more importantly, they just have to become physically tougher during the course of a ball game as a group. We have guys who are individually tough guys, individually pretty stout football players, but the thing about offensive line plays, it's those 5 guys working together on a constant basis throughout a football game. And I think that just comes through practice reps.
Teams will obviously keep the ball away from Williams. What ways will you get him the ball?
That's the $1 million question we had Saturday morning. The thing about Anthony is he's pretty diverse as far as his abilities. He's not just a receiver. We can get him the ball as a back in our backfield. We can actually line him up at quarterback if we want to line him up at quarterback. We can put him back there as a single punt returner. Right now we have 2 punt returners back there, but we could put him back there as a single returner. I don't think he's going to see a whole lot of kickoffs because people aren't going to kick the ball to him. But we're finding ways to and trying to be way more creative in ways to get him the football.
Thanks, Coach. Coming up next, we'll get Coach to look ahead at this week's season opener against the Woodlawn Panthers. We'll be right back.
Come on down to the United Way of St. Charles Parish's annual Battle for the Paddle on Thursday, October 6, 2016 at the West Bank Bridge Park in Luling. Admission is $5, which can get you all the gumbo and jambalaya you can eat. Kids under 10 get in free. Parking for the event will be in the areas highlighted in yellow. For more information and the full map, check the website. There will be shuttles going back and forth between parking areas and the West Bank Bridge Park. Parking inside the park will be prohibited the day of the event. We hope to see you there.
Welcome back to On the Prowl. I'm your host, Gabby Raby. What did you learn about Woodlawn from watching their Jamboree?
Well, I tell you what, they have a really good player in Javen Myers. He's a UL Monroe committee. He's a lot like Anthony for us. They play him all over the place. He's a special athlete. But the big thing I learned about him, Woodlawn went through that devastating flooding in the Baton Rouge area, and they were still able to get a team together, continue to practice together. And when you look at them on film, it's almost like football for them is a way to forget about all the troubles that they have back at home with the flooding. And so it really is a way to kind of unite a team and bond a team. And that's one of the things I noticed about them on film. They're really kind of a close-knit group of guys. And I think a lot of it has to do with all of them, or most of them, are dealing with the tragedy back, in the area where they live with the flooding. And so we're going to have a challenge ahead of us. They were beating us last year late in the third quarter. We went up there to play them, and Peyton Robert, who's graduated, Peyton came up with a great strip and fumble or recovery, and we were able to bring it in and score on it and get a late touchdown late in the game to put it out of reach. But it's going to be a tough football game, and Coach Luquette does a lot of things well up there with those guys. They're very well coached, and they're going to give us some problems.
How do you feel about going into the season with your team being healthy?
That's a huge advantage. We got some nicks and a couple of guys that are sore. But I think from an overall standpoint, other than Mako Marin, who's our backup quarterback, we lost him during the summer playing summer league basketball. He tore his ACL and his PCL, so he's going to miss his sophomore year. And we kind of had to shift a few guys around to give us some depth at quarterback. And that hurt us a lot. But other than that, everybody's healthy from a standpoint that it's a typical football wear and tear, even early in the year.
The Advocate has you ranked number 5 in the state in large schools. Do you think you deserve this ranking?
Well, it's a preseason ranking. It's based upon what you did in last year's season, the kids you have coming back. But there are some teams that are ranked behind us that have traditionally beaten us, at least the 2 years I've been there. And there's probably a couple of teams ranked ahead of us that we've traditionally beat. So all those ranking things will kind of play itself out. Personally, I wish we weren't ranked at all. Kind of makes you a little hungry. But you don't really have any control over that. I don't know if we're the fifth best team in the metro area. Jesuit was ranked behind us, and they just got finished, putting a Jamboree win on us. So it'll play itself out. It's nice because it's nice to look at, but in the long run, it really is not going to mean anything 10 weeks from now.
Thanks for joining us, Coach.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me on board.
And that will do it for this week's edition of Hahnville on the Prowl. For updates and news on Press Play Productions, check out our website at presstheplay.tv. I'm your host, Gabby Raby. Thanks for watching.